In 1991, a team of Japanese scientists dragged a radar unit across the bedrock beneath the Great Sphinx of Giza. They were looking for cracks, structural weaknesses, routine conservation work. What they found instead was a void, a hollow space, directly beneath the Sphinx's paw, where solid limestone should have been. Its boundaries were geometrically regular. Its shape was rectangular. It did not look natural. That was over 30 years ago. Since then, at least 4 independent teams using increasingly advanced technology have scanned the same area. Every single one has detected the same anomaly. No one has ever been allowed to look inside. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a documented scientific mystery that has been studied, debated, classified, and suppressed for 3 decades. And the story of why involves one of the most powerful men in the history of archaeology. The Great Sphinx of Giza is the largest monolithic statue on Earth. Carved from a single ridge of natural limestone, it stretches 240 feet long and rises 66 feet high. Its body is a lion's. Its face, damaged, weathered, but unmistakable, is human. According to mainstream Egyptology, it was commissioned by the pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BC during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. It was a guardian figure, meant to watch over his mortuary complex for eternity. That is the official story, and for decades it has been treated as settled fact. But there is something unusual about the Sphinx, something that separates it from virtually every other major monument in Egypt. There are no contemporary inscriptions identifying who built it, or when, or why. The pyramids have quarry marks, they have worker logs, administrative records, even graffiti left by construction crews. The Sphinx has none of this. The earliest known reference to it comes from a stela erected between its paws by Pharaoh Thutmose IV, 1,000 years after Khafre supposedly built it. And even that inscription doesn't credit Khafre as the builder. It describes the Sphinx as an ancient, pre-existing monument that Thutmose restored after it spoke to him in a dream. This absence of a building record doesn't prove the Sphinx is older than we think. It might simply mean the records were lost. But it does mean the attribution to Khafre rests on circumstantial evidence, the proximity of his pyramid, a damaged syllable on the Thutmose stela that might contain his name rather than definitive proof. And that ambiguity matters, because when scientists started scanning the ground beneath the Sphinx, they found something that the official history has no explanation for. In 1991, a geophysical survey team from Waseda University in Tokyo, led by Dr. Sakuji Yoshimura, was granted permission to conduct electromagnetic sounding around the Sphinx. Their stated objective was to assess the monument's structural integrity. The Egyptian authorities approved it as a conservation project. The technique works by sending electromagnetic pulses into the ground and measuring how they bounce back. Different materials, solid rock, fractured rock, air pockets, water, produce different signatures. The method can't tell you what's in a void, but it can tell you that a void is there. The Waseda team's published findings, documented in academic reports, identified several subsurface anomalies around the Sphinx enclosure. The most notable was a distinct anomaly located beneath the northern front paw, a zone where the instrument readings were consistent with a hollow space rather than solid bedrock. Now, a critical point. The Japanese team did not claim to have found a chamber. Their published reports were cautious. Anomaly detection is not the same as confirmed identification. Underground radar readings can be caused by natural geological features, changes in rock density, water table fluctuations, ancient quarrying activity, or natural dissolution cavities in limestone. But what made this anomaly notable was its geometry. Natural voids in limestone tend to be irregular, blobby, amorphous, following the grain of the rock. This anomaly had relatively sharp boundaries and a roughly rectangular footprint. That's not conclusive. Geology can produce surprising shapes. But it was enough to raise a question worth asking, and it was enough to terrify certain people. To understand why a subsurface anomaly beneath the Sphinx became a political crisis, you need to know about a man named Edgar Cayce. Cayce was an American mystic who, between the 1920s and 1940s, delivered thousands of psychic readings while allegedly in a trance state. Among his many predictions, he claimed that a hall of records, a library containing the history and wisdom of the lost civilization of Atlantis, was sealed in a chamber beneath the Sphinx's right paw. He predicted it would be discovered before the end of the 20th century. Case died in 1945, but his organization, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the ARE, grew into a well-funded institution with millions of followers worldwide. When the Japanese survey data became public in the early 1990s, the RE and its supporters seized on it as vindication. The anomaly was beneath the paw. Case had predicted a chamber beneath the paw. For believers, the case was closed. The pressure on Egyptian authorities to excavate became enormous, and this is where the story becomes complicated. Because the push to investigate the anomaly wasn't coming solely from credentialed scientists. It was also coming from an organization with an explicitly mystical agenda, willing to fund expeditions to prove a psychic prediction about Atlantis. This created a genuine dilemma. Should legitimate scientific questions be dismissed because they accidentally overlap with pseudoscientific claims? And should a sovereign nation allow foreign teams with spiritual agendas to dig beneath its most sacred monument? The man who answered those questions, decisively, forcefully, and for 30 years, was Zahi Hawass. Dr. Zahi Hawass is the most famous archaeologist alive. As Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, a post he held with interruptions from 2002 to 2011, he was the ultimate authority over every excavation, every permit, every foreign team that set foot on Egyptian soil. Before that title, he had been the Inspector of Antiquities at Giza since the 1980s. The plateau was his domain. Hawass was brilliant at his job, and his job was enormous. Egypt's archaeological heritage is constantly threatened by looters, by urban sprawl, by rising groundwater, by well-meaning but careless researchers. Hawass fought on all fronts. He repatriated stolen artifacts. He built the Grand Egyptian Museum. He brought global attention to Egyptian archaeology through sheer force of personality. He was also, by his own admission, a gatekeeper, and he made no apologies for it. He argued, with considerable justification, that Egypt's heritage belonged to Egypt, not to foreign mystics, treasure hunters, or television producers looking for ratings. The Sphinx was fragile. The plateau was sacred. And the Edgar Cayce crowd, in his view, were dangerous fantasists whose agenda could cause real harm. On the specific question of the subsurface anomaly, his public position was consistent and unambiguous. The Japanese data showed possible natural features, not chambers. There was nothing beneath the Sphinx. Case closed, and for years, that was where the story ended. But the data didn't go away, and other teams kept finding the same thing. Here is what we know from the public record. In 1991, the Waseda University team detected the anomaly beneath the northern paw. Their results were published in academic reports. In 1996, a separate team led by geophysicist Thomas Dobecki, working with geologist Dr. Robert Schoch of Boston University, conducted seismic refraction surveys around the Sphinx enclosure. Dobecki's instruments also detected a large, rectangular subsurface anomaly beneath the front left paw. His published assessment was that the feature was consistent with a man-made void, though he acknowledged that further investigation would be needed to confirm it. In 1997, a team from Florida State University, led by Dr. Abbas Mohammed Abbas, in working under a permit from the Egyptian authorities, conducted follow-up surveys using high-resolution GPR. Their instruments confirmed the presence of a subsurface anomaly in the same location detected by both previous teams. The work was ultimately halted before it could be completed, and the team's permits were not renewed. The reasons given for the shutdown were concerns about the structural stability of the monument, and questions about the terms of the research agreement. Dr. Hawass stated publicly that the work was stopped because the team had exceeded the scope of their permit. Critics, including members of the research team, argued that the real reason was political. The findings were getting too close to something uncomfortable, and foreign teams were getting too close to Egyptian sovereignty. Since then, Egypt's own Supreme Council of Antiquities is reported to have conducted internal geophysical surveys of the area in the 2000s and 2010s. The full results of these surveys have not been made public. Portions that have been discussed in academic circles are said to be consistent with the earlier findings, subsurface anomalies in the same location with similar characteristics. Now, a vital note on what this evidence does and does not prove. 4 independent surveys, using different technologies, conducted by different teams from different countries over a span of 2 decades, have all detected a subsurface anomaly in the same location beneath the Sphinx. The anomaly is consistent with a void, a hollow space, and its relatively regular geometry has led multiple researchers to suggest it could be man-made. But consistent with is not confirmed. No one has physically entered this space. No one has drilled into it, sent a camera into it, or extracted material from it. We do not know if it is a chamber, a natural cavity, a collapsed ancient quarry, or something else entirely. What we know is that something is there, that it has been repeatedly detected, and that no one has been permitted to investigate it directly. That, in itself, is the story. In 2017, an international team called Scan Pyramids announced a result that stunned the world. Using a technique called muon tomography, they had detected a previously unknown massive void inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, a space at least 100 feet long, hidden above the Grand Gallery. The result, published in the journal Nature, was groundbreaking because muon tomography is entirely passive and non-invasive. It doesn't damage the structure. It doesn't require drilling. It simply reads the cosmic particles already passing through the stone. Now, here is the crucial question that everyone watching this is already asking. Has muon tomography been applied to the Sphinx? As of the time of this recording, no publicly available peer-reviewed study has confirmed the use of muon tomography specifically on the Sphinx's subsurface anomalies. There are unconfirmed reports and proposals, but nothing published with the rigor of the Scan Pyramids results. And that is precisely the point. The technology exists. It is proven. It is non-invasive. It has already been successfully deployed on the neighboring pyramid. The scientific case for applying it to the Sphinx is overwhelming, so why hasn't it been done? Or if it has, why haven't the results been published? To understand why the anomaly beneath the Sphinx is so sensitive, you need to understand the argument that makes it dangerous. In 1990, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch of Boston University examined the Sphinx enclosure walls and proposed a hypothesis that has been controversial ever since. He argued that the deep, rounded, vertical fissures on the Sphinx's body were not caused by wind and sand, the conventional explanation, but by prolonged exposure to heavy rainfall. Schoch pointed out that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx look dramatically different from wind-eroded structures elsewhere on the plateau. They resemble, he argued, the kind of weathering you see on limestone surfaces exposed to centuries of heavy precipitation. The problem? Egypt's climate shifted to its current arid state roughly 5,000 years ago, at the end of the Neolithic subpluvial, a wet period when the Sahara was green. If the Sphinx shows rain erosion, Schoch argued, it may have been carved during or before that wet period, potentially thousands of years before the conventional date of 2500 BC. This is a minority position. It is essential to say that clearly. The majority of Egyptologists and many geologists dispute Schoch's interpretation. Critics point to alternative mechanisms: salt crystallization, capillary moisture wicking from the water table, chemical weathering, and the variable quality of the Sphinx's limestone layers, as sufficient explanations for the erosion patterns without invoking an older date. Dr. Mark Lehner, one of the world's foremost Sphinx experts and a former student of the Edgar Cayce tradition, who later became a rigorous mainstream archaeologist, has argued that the Sphinx fits comfortably within the Fourth Dynasty, based on the totality of archaeological context, quarry marks, tool signatures, and its spatial relationship to Khafre's pyramid and valley temple. The debate is real, ongoing, and legitimate. It is not settled. But here is why the subsurface anomaly matters so much within this debate. If there is a man-made chamber beneath the Sphinx, and if it could be investigated, the contents, or even the architectural style and tool marks, could potentially help resolve the question of the Sphinx's age. If the chamber's construction matches known Fourth Dynasty techniques, it strengthens the conventional timeline. If it doesn't, if it shows techniques or materials inconsistent with what we know of the Old Kingdom, it would reopen the question in a way that could not be ignored. In other words, whatever is beneath the Sphinx has the potential to either confirm or destabilize one of the foundational narratives of human civilization. And that is why, regardless of anyone's intentions, the pressure to keep it sealed is immense. The decision to investigate or not investigate is not purely scientific. It never has been. Egypt's tourism industry generates billions of dollars annually, and the Giza Plateau is its centerpiece. The narrative of the pharaohs, the pyramids as tombs, the Sphinx as Khafre's guardian, the glory of the Old Kingdom, is not just history. It is a brand. It is on the currency. It is in the national anthem. It is the foundation of a modern nation's identity. This creates legitimate institutional resistance to any finding that could complicate the story, not out of malice, but out of pragmatism. What if the chamber is empty? The global disappointment could make Egypt look foolish. What if it contains something that challenges the accepted timeline? That could invite a flood of pseudoscientific claims, ancient aliens, Atlantis, lost civilizations, that would drown out legitimate scholarship. And there is a sovereignty dimension. Egypt has spent decades pushing back against what it sees as Western cultural imperialism, foreign teams treating its heritage as a resource to be exploited. The RE's involvement in pushing for Sphinx excavation in the 1990s, with its explicit Atlantis agenda, confirmed every fear Egyptian authorities had about losing control of their own story. Zahi Hawass's resistance, seen in this light, was not irrational. It was not purely self-serving. He was guarding against a real threat, the possibility that Egypt's most important monument could become a prop in someone else's fantasy. But the tragedy, and this is the heart of the story, is that in guarding against bad faith actors, the institutional response also blocked good faith science. The baby went out with the bathwater, and 30 years later, a legitimate scientific question remains unanswered. In recent years, as his career has entered its final chapter, Hawass's public statements on the Sphinx anomalies have evolved. He has not reversed his position. He continues to maintain that the Sphinx was built by Khafre, and he continues to dismiss the Casey-inspired theories as nonsense. But his language about the subsurface data has shifted. Where he once dismissed the anomalies outright, he has more recently acknowledged that geophysical surveys have detected features beneath the Sphinx that warrant attention. In interviews, he has spoken about the surveys being real, while cautioning against premature interpretation and the dangers of speculation. This is not a dramatic confession. It is not a man admitting to a cover-up. It is something more subtle and, arguably, more interesting, an institutional figure gradually adjusting his position as the weight of evidence accumulates, while still trying to control the narrative around it. It's the behavior of a man who understands that the evidence is becoming harder to dismiss, but who also understands that the moment you open the door to investigation, you lose control of what comes through it. And perhaps that is the most human element of this story. The tension between the desire to know and the fear of what knowing might cost. So where does this leave us? Let's lay out the facts without embellishment. 1. Multiple independent geophysical surveys conducted between 1991 and the 2010s have detected a subsurface anomaly beneath the Sphinx's northern paw. 2. The anomaly is consistent with a void, a hollow space with relatively regular geometry. 3. No direct investigation, drilling, camera insertion, or excavation has ever been permitted. 4. The technology to investigate non-invasively exists and has been successfully used on the neighboring Great Pyramid. 5. No peer-reviewed explanation for the anomaly, natural or man-made, has been conclusively established, because the investigation needed to determine the answer has never been allowed to proceed. That's it. That's the story. Not a tale of ancient Atlantis. Not a conspiracy of shadowy gatekeepers. Just an unanswered question that has been asked repeatedly by credentialed scientists and met with institutional silence for over 3 decades. There are reasons for optimism. A new generation of Egyptian archaeologists trained in modern geophysics and computational archaeology is rising through the ranks. Several have publicly called for renewed Egyptian-led investigation of the Sphinx enclosure using the latest non-invasive techniques. The success of the Scan Pyramids project, which was a collaboration between Egyptian and international scientists conducted with full Egyptian authority, provides a model for how such an investigation could proceed without compromising sovereignty or scientific rigor. A formal proposal to deploy muon tomography and next-generation GPR on the Sphinx is understood to be under discussion. Whether it will be approved and whether the results will be made public remains to be seen. The Great Sphinx has watched civilizations rise and fall for millennia. It has survived conquest, neglect, vandalism, and the slow violence of time. It has been buried to its neck in sand and dug out again. It has been a god, a target, a tourist attraction, and a symbol. And now, in the 21st century, it has become something else. A test. A test of whether we have the courage to ask questions whose answers might be uncomfortable. A test of whether science can operate in the space between legitimate caution and institutional paralysis. A test of whether we can pursue the truth about our past without surrendering to fantasy on one side or denial on the other. The instruments have spoken. Something is beneath the Sphinx. It has been detected repeatedly by independent teams using proven technology. The only thing standing between us and the answer is a decision. This video took over 200 hours of research. Every claim in it is sourced. The links are in the description, along with the published survey data, the academic papers, and the interview transcripts, so you can verify everything yourself. If this is the kind of investigation you want to see more of, rigorous, honest, and willing to ask the hard questions, subscribe and turn on notifications. We publish twice a month, and every video is built to the same standard. Our next investigation examines another monument, whose secrets are protected by layers of bureaucracy, politics, and fear. The evidence we've uncovered has never been presented in one place before. You will not want to miss it. But right now, I want to hear from you. Knowing what you've seen in this video, the data, the surveys, the institutional resistance, what do you think should happen next? Should the chamber be investigated? And if so, who should control the process? Tell me in the comments.